Let's have a chat, shall we, about faulty foundations today. A lot of people are living in this paradigm that fluid equals good, and I've got a river flowing next to me, but fluid good and yes, no, bad. The binary is bad these days. But in order to live a strong and direct life, a life with direction, you have to build things on solid foundations. And I've been talking a lot in my recent videos about people not being able to actually even agree on what a solid foundation actually is. It used to be that there were just sort of accepted facts, but I think people are so confused and so overloaded with info that it's very difficult to decide what is objective. And the thing is, I talk about a flowing river. We have this idea of fluidity, that you can be one thing 1 minute and then another thing the next, and it's all very unstable and temporary. And I know that maybe it's a cultural thing, but I know as an Englishman, every Englishman's home is his castle. And what that means is it's got very clearly defined boundaries. And even though we've got the river flowing next to us here, you know, we've got the river flowing there, it knows what it is and it has a direction. It knows exactly where it's going. And a river is defined intrinsically by its banks. And the thing is, it's funny when you think about it, when a river bursts its banks, it's not seen as a good thing. It's seen really as a disaster, because it can have an absolutely catastrophic effect on the neighboring, surroundings where it flows through, and it can be incredibly destructive. Funnily enough, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm a demon, maybe I've got wicked ways within me, but when I arrived back in this village, there was one of the biggest storms that had ever hit the area for a good 25 years, and whole sections of the village were cut off and traffic couldn't get through, and there were gigantic freight lorries that were just literally bobbing up and down, floating in the amount of water that had happened. And when you think about a river, it doesn't hesitate. It keeps going, and it winds its way through. And yes, it does follow the path of least resistance. But if you look at how water can shape huge boulders and rocks and mountainsides, and you get these beautiful ornate patterns and sort of stratification and swirling patterns all the way through it, that's the power of direction. And this idea also, I've been meaning to tell this story for a little while, but growing up is about the nature of reality. Growing up, I was really frightened of spiders. I mean, really frightened. My mum and my dad sort of was a bit as well, actually. He was very reluctant about spiders. My mum always, no matter how big they were, and these are house spiders, they're not dangerous ones, but my mum would just completely nonchalantly just sort of walk over it, pick it up and sort of, put it outside, and don't kill them. But the thing is, when I got back, it's something that I'd forgotten, because the flat that I lived in London was in an apartment block of 9 floors, and I was on the 6th floor. It was very high up, and very rarely got spiders in there. When I got back here, I sort of remembered, oh my God, yeah, there are a lot of them up here. And for ages, I was getting rid of them. I was sort of vacuuming them up, or squashing them. It's very naughty of me. I'm not doing it anymore. I've stopped doing that. Part of God's great creation. But once I'd gotten rid of the spiders in the flat that I'm in now, well, guess what happened? Because there was a glitch in the matrix and a disruption in the ecosystem, I was constantly being swarmed and attacked by flies. And I thought, why am I so terrified of spiders? And why am I cutting off my nose to spite my face? Leave the spiders alone. Happy Mr. Spider, I called him in my blog post this morning. Leave the spider to do his thing. He's not doing any harm, and in fact, he's gobbling up all of those good flies and doing the job for me, so I can live in my apartment in harmony. He gets his food and everybody wins, you see? Because when you fight with reality, you're always only ever going to lose. That's a fact. You cannot interfere with the way that things are and argue with them and fight them and expect that peace and joy are going to come out the other end. They're not. And we create problems, and this is the thing with responsibility. It's why responsibility is so vitally important. We have to make the decisions ourselves. We have to. It is our imperative to be responsible adults in the world, because if you look at a lot of adults, they still behave like children. They get irascible and they get irritated and they get whiny and they get entitled and they get spoilt, you know. It's one of the things that was levelled at me, a charge that was levelled at me frequently when I was at university, of how spoilt I was. But all the time, people forgetting that whenever I was meeting with them, it was always me travelling over to them and never them to me. And the thing is, responsibility is its own reward, because you know that you're acting in an adult way, in a considerate way, in a generous way, and that you're always putting yourself out there in the world. That's the beautiful thing with responsibility. It enables you to move around freely. But the price of it is that you have to make good decisions. And the beautiful thing actually, and this, whenever I'm recording these videos, I always have the subject of my blog post in mind, but, and this is sort of a content creation tip, once you actually start speaking out loud, because obviously writing is a very different process. Sometimes I actually read out what I'm writing out loud. But when you start speaking about things, you get all of these other, inferences. And often when you make a decision, it's not actually something extra that you have to do. It's actually about peeling away the layers of the onion and stopping doing things, you know? The most important thing actually is abandoning and relinquishing all of the things that you believe that you need to do, all the things that you want. Once you let them go, they're not in your life anymore. So you're not heavier, you are lighter by taking more responsibility, because you start to focus on the things that really matter, and you can relinquish the ghosts of your past and all the things that are sort of holding on to you and keeping you not anchored, but actually sort of rigid and stuck and imprisoned often when you're so desperate to prove that your point is right, or that there's something from your past that you've got to hold on to, otherwise you're not going to be happy. Responsibility is grabbing life by the horns and being single-mindedly focused on what you can control. And it's about abandoning fear as well, because for decades I was terrified of spiders, but now whenever I see them, rather than frowning, smiling at happy Mr. Spider, because he's helping me and we can both live in harmony, and I can just sort of relax and not have to, you know, get all the accoutrements out in order to deal with that situation. Light, fresh, free-flowing in the world, but free-flowing with direction. Establish what it is that you really, really want and build it. And this is what I'm really focusing on now. Build what you want on really strong and firm and definite foundations. Thank you very much for listening. Martin Pavey here. Please do like and subscribe and share to spread this very important message. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Ciao for now. Strong.